Hi, I'm Corey.
Hi, I'm Tess.
Welcome to A Lovely Place.
We're so glad you've joined us as we invite Jesus into the midst of our lives, learning, and laughter.
We hope this podcast can encourage your heart and make you smile today.
Hello, Corey.
Hi, Tess.
Oh, I love how we always start out with laughter. That's one of the
because
things
it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this again.
right? And we always want laughter to be part of our podcast. So there we go.
Yes.
Hopefully it's joyful to other people too. We'll see.
I think so. It's joyful to my heart when I hear laughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
So today we are on our second episode of talking about Rhythms of Renewal by Rebekah Lyons. And just to recap, last week we talked about the first few rhythms of rest. And so there are 4 rhythms that she outlines, for a life of less stress and anxiety and more peace and purpose.
Amen.
Yes. And so those are rest, restore, connect, and create. So we talked a little bit about rest last week, and we're going to talk about it again today and kind of finish up on those different ways that she, suggests that we can rest. And obviously, rest looks different for every person, but there are, I think there are some things that really are restful for everybody. So
yeah,
we're going to talk about those today.
Or at least to just kind of like check in a little bit, like, oh, how am I doing with that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's something I should think about.
Right? Yes. So the first one is heart work. And I guess what stood out to me on this one, and I'm trying to think if I saw this comparison in her book or somewhere else, but the comparison of confession versus apologizing, was that in here?
I think she might have talked about that. Because in her closing, she was talking about, when's the last time you confessed stuff? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah. And so this whole, I don't know if that is in here, but anyway, someone was talking about how apologize comes from the words like or the words that mean apologetics, like defending something. And I was like, oh, that's good. So we don't necessarily want to apologize like I did this because of this and I'm sorry,
right.
But confess and and to be able to just say like, wow, that thing that I did was not right,
Yeah.
And she's talking more of confession of like just really like pouring out to God like what's on our hearts, that kind of thing. But that's a good one. And I think to me that goes along with the taking inventory that we talked about last week. Kind of not inventory of your life, but kind of an inventory of your inner heart, like your inner mind or whatever, your inner world. There we go. And being able to talk to God about that.
I like when she said, you cannot heal what is hidden, but when you confess something out loud, you bring it into the light where it can be healed. And I just thought, how many times do I try to keep something like just stuff it? I don't need to think about that, but then it stays in the dark and things in the dark grow mold and they're wet and dank. And it's like in the light, it's like, sunshine and smells good. And it's not like that. So it's like, okay, how can I have my heart be sunshine and warmth instead of dark, dank, and stinky?
Yeah.
That's a big picture in my head right now. I'm sorry. Hashtag spring cleaning, anyone?
Right. Well, that reminds me of this story I was going to tell you, and I was relating it kind of to one of the next principles, but it also kind of goes along with this. So I was gardening today, and we have this section of our yard that like butts up against our neighbor's yard, and they have a rose bush there that's kind of out of control, and then there's like those vines. I think they're like ivy or something like that.
Okay.
And they just kind of go everywhere. And then we have our little Japanese maple tree that's like trying its best to grow, but it's kind of running into everything else. And so related to bringing things into the light, I was like chopping down some of the ivy, and it was really dark and overgrown and gross beneath that. But it was reminding me of like the whole reason why we rest, and specifically related to like Sabbath rest, where we actually stop what we're doing, like just cease our striving, kind of a thing. And it made me think, like, in this section of my yard, there's this fence. The fence is there. You can't see the fence anymore.
Okay.
There's like a section of fence there, but then there's ivy, and then there's rose bush, and the ivy really is like kind of taking over. So it's like, as I was cutting it down, I could see that there was like layers and layers of like dead ivy, and then the new stuff that just keeps kind of like piling on top of it. And then the maple tree. And so we had this weird discovery the other day that the leaves of the maple tree had fallen off, but hadn't fallen. They had just like sat on top of it and created this kind of canopy.
Okay.
And there were lots of snakes deciding to sleep there when it was warm, which was cool for my nature loving, like, sciencey interests, like, whoa, but then scary for my gardener self, who's like, I want to trim my tree and I don't want snakes jumping out at me, because that sounds terrifying.
Because they jump. But I know what you mean.
Right? Because I cut one branch and one fell out of the tree, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a snake there. And then later there were like 6 of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, that to say that I felt like in my mind there was this, in front of me I could see this picture of what happens when things there's no space or differentiation between them. And it reminded me of why we rest, because if we're just doing and never making space for just that, for air, for space, like it all gets piled on top of each other. And it becomes a place that's dead and dark underneath, And so it just made me remember, like, it's so important for there to be that separation. And, so Rebekah talks too about like a morning routine, like before you get started with your day, giving some time to the Lord and some quiet time, and and how that just starts your day off right. And so kind of giving your life that space to have not everything shoved all together, without any distinction of what is what. So
it kind of makes me think of this office I'm sitting in right now, that there's computers and desks, and then there's Legos for Riker, and then there's these bookshelves, and then there's these piles of stuff, and then I have an affinity of pom-poms on my desk, all different colors also. So I just find that this space is like kind of like that, just like covered, like there's just layers of stuff, and nothing's defined, and it does not feel restful in here because there's so many things happening. So I just have to focus in right onto you, and I'm like, okay, I'm in my lovely place. Just right here. This is good. It's all going to be good, Lord. Help us, please. But it takes work to rest, right? Like I was excuse me, I'm challenged by the Jewish faith and the practice of Sabbath, and preparing before the Sabbath happens. So then when they're honoring the Sabbath day, then they're not doing a bunch of stuff. Like you did all the preparation beforehand. So you already had all your meals planned, you already had your errands ran, and you just had time that you gave to yourself. Like I was kind of thinking like how much work it is before camping to get it all ready. But then when you're there, usually it feels a little less like, because it's like all the decisions are made. We're having sandwiches and hot dogs or whatever the menu is. Like, I just thought, how can I have that simplicity in my every week, like to plan ahead, to rest, like and to honor that, like, I just feel really challenged. Like, wait a minute. How can I do that? How can I take those layers away, like you're saying, to make it be a beautiful garden space that you want to look at, right? And it doesn't feel like, oh, that's a lot of work. And then snakes are crawling everywhere. And it's like, oh, I don't want to sit there, right? Like, the heebie-jeebies. Oh.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
That's an interesting challenge. Like, I guess I don't think I put that together, like, to prepare for Sabbath.
Well, that makes me think too, like, so we had guests over the other day to play games, and usually when we have people over at our house, we'll make the main parts of dinner, and then they can bring like a salad or something. And so this time it seemed like an easy enough meal to me, but there were some, like, getting it ready to go into the oven while they were here, the guests, and that made the whole time feel kind of hectic. And then it was like there were, other things with the kids that were coming up, and it didn't go as like smoothly as I had anticipated, which made me think that, for like the Sabbath, Rebekah talks about how Jewish people who practice the Jewish faith, that they will prepare, like, and then it starts at sunset on Friday or whatever, and so, like you said, they'll do all those things. And so it makes me think of preparing for like a guest to come. Like, you don't want to, like, we usually at least clean our houses somewhat before our guests arrive, and we make sure that, there's room at the table to eat or whatever. And we make sure that the food is somewhat prepared for them, so that when our guests come, we can focus on them instead of tasks. And so that makes me think of the Sabbath too. Like, how are we preparing for God to be our guest, even though he's with us all the time, that special time, but it does take a lot more forethought, which I think is what I struggle with. Like, we usually try to Sabbath, if you will, Friday evening to Saturday evening, and it doesn't always happen perfectly because we aren't as intentional about it, but we always do a Friday night movie night. But so sometimes on Friday afternoon, I'm like scrambling, like, oh gosh, I forgot I need to get the dishes done and I need to do this. And, so that I'm not crazy frantic once the kids get home from school and we are ready to just have our family time. So, but I've been loving this new journal that a friend got me. It's like a journal planner kind of a thing. And it is, I'll have to like link it, figure out where she bought it and link it in the show notes. But anyway, it goes through, and on Sunday is the day that they have as the Sabbath in the planner, but it goes through, and on Sundays you do what's called an examine, where you're looking at like different elements from the prior week, like how did things feel in your spirit and in your body and your mind and your relationships and your, work, home, and resources. I think those are all the sections that it goes over. So you like look over the past week, and then you write with intention for what you hope for the next week, like kind of what you're hoping to, I don't know, if improve or be intentional about. And then the next page is like just this, it has like a couple spots for your weekly, this week's priorities kind of thing, which I like too, because it helps me to think ahead instead of just going in the moment. And then it also has just a white space, which the author talked about. That is a reminder that the Sabbath is meant to make space for us to just enjoy our Creator, enjoy his other creation, nature and things like that. But the white space is important. So I'm really enjoying the journal. I think it's helping me to remember all of those things. So, what are some of? Oh, go ahead.
Well, it just makes me think of, as Rebekah was talking about doing the heart work, and this morning I was getting like, I was like, probably needed to just sit down and do a brain dump, but I just felt like I couldn't even do that because I'm like, I got to get dressed and I got to get ready to school and get this going so then I could be here for this moment. And, but it was just like, I ended up turning on the Soul Space app on my phone and listening to it. And I don't even really remember what they were talking about, but it just cues me in to pay attention to how am I breathing right now? What am I feeling? And just kind of like recenter, to just give my brain some space to just either think about things for a second or to just go, okay, you're all right now. This is important. You can get dressed and put some makeup on. Like, that's a good thing. And then, I know it was about being fearfully and wonderfully made. So as I'm putting my eyeshadows on, I'm like, oh, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Not that I have to have eyeshadow on to be wonderfully made, but it was just like a nice, like, I just felt myself getting mixed up or in my head. And I was like, okay, I just need to take a pause. And then when I was reviewing this, I was like, oh yeah, like, oh, what do I need to release? What do I need to change? What do I need to confess? Or questions that she's having you ponder and think about. And I think it goes back to our attitude, or my attitude. And then that makes me think of the sermon I listened to from Paul David Tripp. And I shared it on my Facebook wall, but he did it. It was a marriage retreat or conference, or there was 3 messages, and it was all about forgiveness. And the first sermon, there's 3 sections of it. It was like all about you and Jesus, and what are you holding on to, not what's your spouse doing or your, it couldn't apply to any relationship, but it was so challenging. And just are you being entitled, and are you getting weapons out? And I'm just like, oh my Lord, please help me. Like, I don't want to be that person. So it's like, okay, you need to take a pause. Yeah. Like, have we learned this yet? Space, pause, whatever word we need to put it in. It's like, we need to time out. Like, just to have that blank page.
Right.
Just sit there and stare at the sunshine, or, like.
Yes. Well, and it reminds me of like a boiling teapot, and I suppose this applies to like when we talked about anger a couple of weeks ago or whatever. But like even just those, what sounded like swirling thoughts that you were talking about like this morning, as they kind of boil and bubble, it's like sooner or later the teapot's going to start screaming, or we can take a moment to pause and like pull it off the burner or open it or something, so that
let some steam
out,
out.
let that out. Yeah. Otherwise it can get to not a good spot, like Rebekah talks about her panic attacks, like had started coming back, so when we don't pay attention to those things and we don't give the time and space to process and kind of let it all out, then it can come out in bad ways. It will come out in bad ways.
Right. Well, and then Rebekah's book, she talks about sleeping, and she did a bunch of sleep. I liked how she was like, I'm going to research this. Like, she was like, I need to find the science about, so I appreciate that about her. And just, she was just diving in like, okay, what's the deal with this? And how it's easy to like, oh, I got enough sleep last night or whatever. But it's like, do I honor that time? Do I put myself to bed when I need to be like, or am I staying up too late? And so I've been challenging that way, to just like go to bed better. So I feel like I need to focus on my nighttime routine versus my morning routine at this moment, like to just get myself, which would make the morning nicer if I've more well rested. Like, I feel like I need to go all the way back to yesterday before I can even plan my mornings out. Like, I'm like, I'm not ready for that one yet.
One of the things that's been helping me lately, and it's been helping me fall asleep. I'm struggling with having quality sleep lately, which I need to kind of figure out. But one thing that I've been doing is I started a board on Trello, like just my life board kind of a thing. And for those who don't know what Trello is, it's like a kind of like a list making, but also like a project management like tool. But I have on it like a card for brain dump. And then so I've been trying to, when I go to bed at night, give myself like 5 or 10 minutes before bed where I just sit and I try to let anything that comes to mind into my mind, kind of not the opposite, but like not the same as meditation, like just trying to let it all come in and then putting it into my brain dump card, and then it's there. Because one thing that I remember reading one time is that if there's something you need to remember, your brain will keep reminding you of it until you've like recorded it somehow. Otherwise your brain will go, this is something we need to remember, I need you to think of it again.
Yeah.
And that's annoying at 3:00 in the morning. So,
remember?
Right. So I
I'm
have been
helping
doing
you.
that.
Yeah.
And then as part of like my morning routine, I'm trying to go back and look at it and then either put it on the calendar or do it, so that it feels productive, or it feels like at least I'm not missing so many things, because then my brain can really rest when I go to
Yeah.
sleep. Now, don't talk to me about songs being stuck in my head at 3:00 in the morning. That's a whole different story, and I don't know how to fix it.
Well, couldn't you just brain dump the songs too?
I don't know. I blame my children. They listen to really annoying songs.
Yeah.
And then I wake up and it's like,
something
why?
about the floor is lava.
Right. Right now it's Phineas and Ferb music. So
okay.
Anyway, so that's something that's helped my brain to shut off during the night, which has been helpful, because I notice when my anxiety is getting worse, my sleep gets a lot worse.
Yeah.
And then it all kind of turns into a vicious cycle, which she talked about in the book too, So sleep is important.
Definitely so. And I like how Rebekah, in the section about practicing Sabbath and stopping the work, that she focuses on how she's pays attention to her marriage relationship and has put time away for shorter dates, and then like quarterly they do an overnight thing or whatever, or something like this whole like process that kept building on each other. And so I'm really challenged by that. Like, okay, how can I put that into our relationship, our schedule, to create space, even though it feels like I'm putting more things on the calendar, but it's like, okay, wait, this is important to pay attention. And the other day we were having a family snuggle time and something, and I don't remember how it came up, but we were like, it's good that mommy and daddy love each other, right, Gerb? Because that's your foundation of your family. And he was just kind of like, oh, okay, but I'm going to be in the middle of you two, or whatever, however it went. But I just thought, I was like, oh, that's so important. And I needed to hear that, I think. Like, I've just been trying to be mindful of when Jesus speaks to me. And that was like a moment. And then there's other moments. And if we're going too fast, we miss them, I think. So that's been my challenge of paying attention when Jesus is speaking and into the middle of all the different things. He's with me all the time. And I just want him like, okay, I'm with you, Lord. Like, I want to be in that place. Like,
yeah,
help me to see you. Like, where is that? All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All those little whispers of things that if we're moving too fast, we don't hear them, or we don't make space to ponder like what they mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, we have a verse that we had talked about today, which is Psalm 91. So I'm going to read that real quick. Psalm 91. Yeah. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. I also love verse 4. It says, He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. And so I guess the vision that I get there is just safety, because it's talking about places of defense against armies or whatever, the different parts of like a castle or something. And also the wing, covering you with his feathers and under his wings, so just being safe, that when we rest in him and trust in him, he will keep us safe.
I think I remember was talking about that because I think we shared a bird feather picture before. And so I'm like, look at that. Like God's like gently reminding us like, hey, remember to dwell with me and be tucked in with me. Like, I just love that he says the same things to us. Like, hey, Corey, are you listening?
Right.
Yes, Lord. Please keep talking. Like, I just love that. Yeah.
That's good.
Oh, and how he speaks through you, friend, to me. And I just am so encouraged. And so my heart is that you listeners, our friends, would just be so encouraged that you're not alone in this world and Jesus is with you and he wants to whisper things into your heart. Like, I just feel like let's not miss him and let's help each other to find that lovely place with him.
Yeah. And to remember that we are worth resting. Like we're worth taking care of ourselves. Like, I think sometimes we just cut ourselves short and think, oh, I'm just going to keep going. But God, like the reason he rests and the reason he gave us rest and the reason he made the Sabbath was to serve us and to show that he loves us because we're worth it. So, yeah.
Baby, I'm worth it.
All right, friend. Well, it was good talking with you today.
Good talking to you too. And we will be back again together soon.
All right.
Bye, friends.